Don't go before acceptances. Pick up the line first. Yes! Gone! It's over! Clarke's done the damage. Australia win!
As the sun sets on Sydney on January 6th, 2008, one man turned a test match on its head. After being thrown the ball with the maximum 2 overs left, it took Micheal Clarke just 5 deliveries to snatch a victory that looked like it was not going to eventuate. If this was any normal test match, this would be the topic of discussion in the media in the days after, a nail-biting affair with an unlikely hero who grabbed victory from the jaws of, well, a draw, I guess. However, this was not a normal test match, and Australia had not won over a normal opponent, so this very much was not what happened. To say India took this loss poorly would be an understatement of grand proportions. As you'll see, this video is not just about the 2008 SCG test, because this would not be the first attempt from a large, powerful, self-righteous and greedy organisation who use its power to enact revenge, the effects of which are still badly hurting cricket today. To understand the moment where cricket began to spiral downhill, we must go back to the 1983 Cricket World Cup, the third edition of the tournament. Indian cricket was in a different universe financially to where it is right now. Going into the third Cricket World Cup, India was struggling, and were expected to do nothing. After all, their only World Cup win to show for at this point was a win over a paltry East Africa team, which no longer even exists. In this tournament, they were not given a helping hand when they had to play the 2-time defending champs first up, the mighty West Indies. India were 66-1 outsiders and yet produced a huge upset win at Old Trafford to win by 34 runs. Despite losing to the West Indies 6 days later at the Oval, India finished second in their group and took on England in the semi-final, where they recorded a surprise 6-wicket victory to set up a final at Lords against, you guessed it, the West Indies. India lost the toss and were sent into bat, and they stumbled their way to 216, but the West Indies' reply never got out of second gear and they were bowled out for just 140, with 8 overs to spare, and India had won the World Cup, with 216 remaining at the time of recording, the lowest winning score in a World Cup final. Indian captain Kapil Dev lifted the trophy as the leader of a side who were given 33-1 odds to win the tournament when it began. As a result of their World Cup win, India thought they were deserving to host the next World Cup. Every tournament at this stage had been held in England, but they would need to do some more work to get the tick of approval. So they were one of the co-founders of the Asian Cricket Council in September 1983, who conducted the inaugural Asia Cup in 1984 to prove Asian nations could host big cricket tournaments. India was able to, along with Pakistan, successfully host the 1987 World Cup, the first out of England, and there have been plenty more. I've included the 2027 and 2031 World Cups to this table because I think it is very obvious South Africa and India will host the finals of those tournaments, and it shows India has hosted a third of the finals post-1983 and were also co-hosts in 1996 as well. South Africa, Australia and England all have 2, in addition to the 1 for both Pakistan and the West Indies. By the time the 2031 World Cup comes around, it will be the third tournament where the final was played in India over the span of just 6 tournaments, with the other 3 nations being Australia, England and South Africa. This is a massive turn of events. So how did it happen? In 1991, for the first time in 21 years, South Africa would return from cricketing exile to play a 3-match ODI series against India. The Board for Control of Cricket in India, the BCCI, at the time paid TV companies to broadcast Indian matches, not the other way round. It wasn't until this series, when South African networks who had interest in paying the BCCI to televise these matches, did they realise they could get more money from TV rights than they could ever dream from ground ads and ticket sales. So I know I've done heaps of background, but I'm going to do a little more if I may before we get to the 2008 Test match. This Test match involves South Africa at Port Elizabeth in 2001. This was the second match of a 3-match series, and it ended in a draw. Match referee Mike Dines imposed suspensions on 6 Indian players. There was an uproar in the world of cricket. Players were imposed with a 1-test ban for excessive appealing, including captain Sourav Ganguly. But the biggest saga involved Indian cricket's most beloved figure of all time, Sachin Tendulkar.
That has ignited cricket's latest controversy. Sachin Tendulkar shown running his fingers along the seam of the ball on day 3 of the second test against South Africa. It was enough to convince match referee Mike Dines that Tendulkar was guilty of ball tampering.
The BCCI and Indian fans were irate, and many in the media jumped to Tendulkar's defence.
Not Sachin Tendulkar. Never, ever, ever.
But commentator Tony Gregg and Australian captain Stephen Waugh would not be bullied.
I cannot believe, I saw Ravi Shastri standing up there, I heard boycott. I cannot believe that anyone who sees that footage could possibly defend him. Normally when you clean the seam you look at it. You've got to see where the dirt is. I mean, he's running his nail. He was the only one to swing it. Charles Callis does swing the ball a bit. He didn't swing it at all. Tendulkar did. Guilty as can be of manipulating the ball, in my view.
And in War's mind, a suspended sentence isn't enough.
It's more a warning than a penalty. It's unless you get a ban, it's not really a penalty. It's I guess it's a smear on your reputation, which is pretty severe. But there's a ball there and there's a bat, and that's a contest. And if you alter either of those, you shouldn't be playing.
Indians were really angry regarding those comments from War.
A comment, and I thought his was a pretty constructive comment. He said, look, I've seen the footage. I thought that he looked to me as if he was picking the seam. If he was guilty, talking about Tendulkar. The Indian press today have turned on a guy who's one of the most popular men in India. I mean, the things that Steve Waugh has done in India are just quite incredible. They have turned on him like you would not believe. They have told him to stay at home and concentrate on New Zealand. Ganguly, of course, you'd expect him to come out. He's jumping up and down and doing exactly the same thing. So there are lots of little things happening, all of which is, as far as I'm concerned, a little unsavoury.
BCCI told the ICC the bans were wrong and they didn't want Mike Dennis as the match referee for the last Test match. The ICC refused to budge, but the South African Cricket Board did, and they played the third Test match without ICC permission.
Won't be officially recognised either in terms of countries' records or players' records. There won't be Test match championship points awarded.
So why did South Africa go through with this? Richie Beno explained it very clearly.
First of all, India reminded South Africa that they were going to lose 8 million rand if they didn't play the match and if this wasn't a Test match. And then the Indian government was called in and they talked to the South African government, who then issued instructions to the players, and that's why you've got in that Sean Pollock thing the statement, the players were not consulted.
And after all of that, we come at long last to the 2008 SCG Test match. Australia had won 15 consecutive Test matches, including the one before this in Melbourne. Australia won the toss and batted first. They lost a couple of early wickets and were at 2 for 27 when Ponting and Hussey were at the crease. The score is 2 for 55. Ricky Ponting is on 17. We now must talk about the two men we are about to know very well, the two umpires, Mark Benson and Steve Buckner. Their word is final because in 2008 there is no DRS, no recourse for an incorrect umpiring decision. Benson turned down an Indian appeal for caught behind, which replays and Snicko showed was in fact edged to keeper MS Dhoni by Ponting. Australia's score was 2 for 95 at lunch, with Ponting looking like he would go on to make a signature big score. However, with Australia 2 for 119 and Ponting on 55, he was dismissed. Many would call it justice, but it was error number 2 for the umpires, as Ponting was judged led before wicket despite practically middling the ball onto his pads. That error began a mini collapse as Australia lost 3 wickets for just 16 runs. New batter Brad Hogg began attacking the Indian bowlers, and he and Andrew Symonds got Australia to 6 for 193 when this happened.
And that's out. Big edge. Well, there's a big noise there, and I reckon Steve Buckner's the only one on the ground who hasn't heard it. Andrew Symonds is not moving.
Perhaps the match's most egregious error, Andrew Symonds, someone we will also get to know, was proven by Snicko to have nicked the ball through to the keeper MS Dhoni. However, umpire Steve Buckner stands his ground and Symonds refuses to walk. At T, Australia are 6 for 214, Symonds is on 38. When Symonds was on 48 and Australia 6 for 238, Dhoni attempts to stump Symonds, appeals, and Buckner takes it to third umpire Bruce Oxenford, who gives him not out on a very marginal call. Symonds brought up his century in the 70th over with his side 6 for 305. Brad Hogg was the only wicket India could claim in the final session, falling for 78, and its stumps Australia were 7 for 376. 100 runs on from the last stumping controversy, with Symonds on 148, Dhoni again goes for the stumping, and this time Buckner elects not to refer the decision to the third umpire, despite it being similarly close to the previous stumping attempt. Symonds went on to an unbeaten 162, and India were able to clean up the Aussie towel on day 2, with the host all out for 463. Despite the Indians surviving the 3 overs before lunch, all of those overs being maidens, Australia would strike first when Brett Lee bowled Jaffa with, well, a Jaffa. The only question was whether or not the delivery was a no ball. The camera angle was very inconclusive, and in any case, India are 1 for 8. The game slowed down in the last 2 sessions of day 2. Laxman would make a century before Australia took 2 late wickets, including Laxman for 109, and by the end of day 2, India was 3 for 215, with Australia's lead reduced to 253 runs. Tendulkar and Ganguly were ready to move the game game forward on day 3. Shortly after the lunch break, Dhoni and Kumble were dismissed in quick succession. India was 7 wickets down and still more than 100 runs in the rear. Harbhajan Singh and Tendulkar both began to score quickly. Harbhajan got past 50 and then Tendulkar got to 100 after the tea break. The 8th wicket partnership passed 100 and the match was flipped on its head. It was in the 3rd session of day 3 when this happened.
Verbal exchanges with Andrew Symonds and Ponting, plus a closed-mouth reprimand from umpire Mark Benson, triggered by Harbhajan allegedly calling Symonds a monkey.
Andrew Symonds was the only non-white member of the Australian team in this test match and had been on the receiving end of racial abuse through monkey chants when Australia toured India for 7 ODIs in November 2007. At the end of the 116th over of India's first innings, Harbhajan, who just edged a Brett Lee delivery over the slips for 4, tapped Lee on the backside with his bat, which got no reaction from Lee. Symonds felt the need to stand up for Lee, so in his own words, had a bit of a crack at Harbhajan, telling him exactly what I thought of his antics. Symonds went on to claim that Harbhajan called him a monkey. Batting partner Tendulkar alleged in the ensuing hearing, and also in his autobiography, that he heard Symonds going after Harbhajan repeatedly in an aggressive verbal assault, including before the layover and after the incident. He said he heard Harbhajan use the North Indian swear word Teramaki, which translates to your mother, in a very derogative manner, which is still not good. He's just substituting one form of derogatory abuse with another. We will get back to Monkeygate, but first the rest of this test match. Harbhajan was then dismissed and India surpassed Australia's total. Singh and Sharma then scored 13 and 23 respectively before India were bowled out. Tendulkar finished with 154 not out and India led by 68 runs. Australian openers Matthew Hayden and Philip Jakes survived the 5 overs before stumps on day 3. Australia started day 4 slowly, not helped by a rain delay. When play then resumed, Australia took control of the test match and pushed ahead. Approaching lunch, Jakes held out off a Kumble delivery he swept straight to the fielder on the fence. Ponting came to the crease but was caught out for a first ball duck off the bowling of a pumped-up Harbhajan the day after the Monkeygate allegations. After lunch, Hayden and Hussey pushed ahead. Alright, we haven't had an umpiring error for a while, so here is a couple. Hussey's on 22 when he's trapped low on the pads and given not out by Benson, and then on 45 he, in a similar vein to Ponting in the first inning, edges the ball to Dhoni on a ball going down leg, again given not out by Benson. Meanwhile, Matthew Hayden would go on to a triple-figure score without umpiring assistance and was dismissed by Kumble for 123. The very next ball, Kumble claimed Clarke for a golden duck. On a hat-trick, Kumble hit Symonds on the pad, sparking a loud appeal which was given not out. Symonds and Hussey saw Australia to stumps with a big lead. Day 5. Australia started slowly, but Hussey did bring up his century and finish on 145 not out. Symonds made 61. When Australia declared India needed 333 to win, some commentators, most notably Tony Gregg, were vocal in believing Ponting declared too late. There was no way India could reach the target. They had to bat out the time remaining and hold on to a draw, given an Australian win means they'll retain the Border Gavaskar Trophy, while Australia need 10 wickets. India's second innings got off to a poor start as they lost 1 wicket before lunch when Jaffer fell to Lee again. After the lunch break, India were really struggling. Tendulkar and Laxman both came and went cheaply, leaving Dravid and Ganguly at the crease. There had to be another umpiring error in this innings, and there was. Dravid kept his bat tucked away behind his pad and successfully patted away a ball from Symonds. It was caught by Adam Gilchrist. The Australians appealed loudly for caught behind, and umpire Buckner quickly raised his finger. However, the replays clearly showed the bat was a long way from the ball and the deflection came off the pads before heading into Gilchrist's gloves.
Just have a look whether the bat was anywhere in the way. Oh yes, the bat is nowhere near. It's gone off the pads.
Everything seemed to be tucked behind that front pad, and so the only noise given was the ball flicking the pad, maybe on the way through, but certainly not glove, not bat. It's another shocker.
Hang on a minute, Slaps. He might have been given out LBW.
Still a shocker if that's the case.
We're going to show you the Rahul Dravid dismissal. I want you to look at 2 people here, Adam Gilchrist and Steve Bucknor. Watch for Adam Gilchrist. There you go. Right, Mr. Gilchrist, what did you hear? And you, Mr. Bucknor, what did you see?
In the same over, Yurav was out for a duck, putting India 5 wickets down with more than a session remaining. Ganguly was playing well and on 51 when the match's biggest controversy occurred. He edged a delivery to Micheal Clarke, who took a diving catch. Instead of going upstairs, umpire Benson, in accordance with a pre-series agreement between the two captains, that the word of the fielder would be relied on, Ponting indicated his belief that the catch had been clearly taken and Benson gave Ganguly out. On Australia's Channel 9 coverage, commentators Mark Taylor and Richie Benaud could not see any way that that was anything but out.
Well, the first thing that's got to happen is the decision to be made whether or not it carried in the umpire's eyes, because the batsman hasn't gone. So umpire Benson will have looked at the square leg umpire, and he got the nod from him. Therefore he nodded himself and raised his finger.
Well, there's nothing in there that suggests to me that that hasn't carried. I reckon it's jammed his fingers, caught the ball out. There was no dirt fly up short of the hands. Let's have a look at this angle. And we're not going to see a thing here. It's right behind Mark Benson's leg, should I say. Just the way Micheal Clarke reacts to me suggests that that ball's carried into his hands.
However, on Indian TV, Sunil Gavaskar was practically losing his marbles.
You ask the batsman then. Why is it that a fielder's word has to be believed and not the batsman? Here is a man who did not walk when he was 14, got down the leg side. So why should his word be taken that he or his fielder had taken the catch? It cannot be that you are honest when you're fielding and not so honest when you're batting. That is nonsense, utter nonsense. This is the same man, Micheal Clarke, who stood his ground when he was caught by Rahul Dravid yesterday. And the Indians had to really appeal very strongly before he was given out. Now just have a look at, this is not clear. Now see when he rolls over and see, there is grounded the ball on the turf. So that is not out because he's in the act of taking the catch. You can see that very clear here now. Never mind whether he picked it up on the half volley or whether he picked it up on the full. Right now itself is not out because he's touched the ground with the ball. There it is. Can you see that? That itself should have been a giveaway that was not out. Leave aside the earlier second when he dived for the ball.
I am sorry, but this is wrong on so many levels. Should Benson have gone upstairs instead of relying on Ponting? Yeah, probably. But to say Ponting was in the wrong for believing his younger teammate had taken a clean catch is insane. The ground, much like another catch an Australian made against India in a test match, fourth innings, did not help the fielder secure the catch. That's out. Back to the game. Dhoni and Kumble began to steady India. After the pair survived a few half chances, Dhoni was trapped to LBW for 35 with less than 40 minutes remaining. However, Harbhajan came in to join his captain and appeared comfortable. With a quarter of an hour to go, Micheal Clarke steps up, with India looking like they'll hold on to a draw. The part-timer captured the edge of Harbhajan Singh with his first ball, caught at first slip by Michael Hussey. Before his second delivery, Tony Greig notes the unlikelihood of an Australian victory.
The odds, $8 Australia at the moment.
However, that changes when Clarke traps RP Singh in front and umpire Benson does not hesitate to judge the Indian tailender out LBW. Last to bat is Ishant Sharma, who has brought with him 2 right-hand gloves.
He's got 2 right-hand gloves. That's not a good stay. He's not nervous at all, is he?
That's not as bad as Willis, who went out there without a bat.
He mightn't have his box in, though. That's what I'm worried about.
Is this time wasting or just tailender incompetence? It is genuinely hard to tell. Sharma sees out Clarke's hat-trick ball and the one that follows before he clearly edges the over's 5th delivery to Hussey, who again takes a catch, and just like that, a certain draw is Australia's 16th consecutive test match victory. Game over. Australia win by 122 runs. Kumble stranded not out on 45, and he was not happy. So, another close test match, which didn't go India's way. So what does the BCCI do? They threaten to pull out of the series again. Indian captain Anil Kumble claimed only one team was playing with the spirit of the game. My guess is it was the side not whinging about the umpires and racially vilifying their opposition. What staggers me is how much criticism there was for Ricky Ponting. Let me be blunt. He did nothing wrong. Ponting was an established cricketer and captain at this point. Everyone knew his aggressive captaining style, which is a piece of the puzzle that needs to be factored in into how you defeat his Australian team. Ponting did nothing wrong. It was the Indians. The Indians refused to walk even when they were given out. The Indians were the ones who never stopped complaining about the umpires. It was the Indians who never acknowledged the times the umpiring areas gave them an advantage. And it was the Indians who abused an opposition player in the aftermath of that same player being abused when he was on their home soil. But this was the BCCI. Rich, powerful, no humility. They were wronged because what? Steve Buckner thought this flicked the glove and Clarke made a fair catch? The umpires were not great in this match, to that there is no doubt. But to say the legal act of appealing for a catch or refusing to walk is somehow disqualifying, give me a break. Even Australians criticised Ponting. There was nothing here. He played the way he always plays. That was known for forever at this point. But he got criticism because nobody dared to take on India, no matter how much in the wrong they were. On the evening after the end of Day 5, match referee Mike Proctor, after listening to testimony of Hayden, Simons, Ponting and Gilchrist, as well as that of Tendulkar and Harbhajan, declared that Harbhajan will be banned for 3 test matches. Included in his final report were the words that, "I believe one group is telling the truth," implying that Tendulkar and Harbhajan were lying and that the Australians were telling the truth, because the Australians had no business in covering up something done outside of the laws of cricket. Harbhajan was suspended for 3 matches. Brad Hogg was later charged for the same events as Harbhajan for calling captain Anil Kumble and vice-captain MS Dhoni a bastard, a highly offensive term in India, after the BCCI lodged a complaint. Surprise, surprise, it was not true, but the BCCI could not live with the fact they were the only ones in the wrong, and because of that, they did exactly what they did in South Africa 7 years earlier, threatened to pull out of the tour and send their players home. And back in India, a poll showed 91% of respondents wanted the Indians to come home and abandon the tour. The BCCI issued a statement in which they decided to challenge the unfair decision to suspend Harbhajan Singh, stating the ban was patently unfair.
Board will appeal to the ICC to review the decision of the match referee and suspend its operations till the appeal is disposed of.
The ban imposed on Harbhajan Singh is totally unacceptable.
Despite previously promising not to interfere in the selection of umpires, BCCI wanted Buckner gone, and he would be replaced by Billy Bowden. Buckner's mediocre performance sparked the beginning and the end of his career. He retired from international umpiring on March 29, 2009. The tour would continue, with Harbhajan's suspension on appeal and Buckner gone. India broke Australia's 16-match winning streak in Perth in the next match, and the series would finish with a draw match in Adelaide. On January 28th, after the appeal hearing in Adelaide by ICC Appeals Commissioner Judge John Hanson, the racism charge on Harbhajan Singh was found to be not proved. Harbhajan's 3-test ban was therefore lifted. However, the lesser charge of using abusive language was applied, and Harbhajan was fined 50% of his match fee. So he used abusive language towards the only non-white member of the Australian team, which was not racist. But the BCCI has still never gotten over this loss. Obviously, T20 cricket was on the up and up, so the IPL was always coming, but the BCCI was so mad at the ICC and Australia over this that they set out to build the IPL to what it is today, a Goliath of a tournament, which would be weakened by international cricket, the actual pinnacle being played at the same time, or if Indian players were ever playing in other T20 franchise leagues. So, the BCCI ensures neither is the case. India ensure they get the biggest slice of ICC revenue, meaning the small nations who play a handful of matches every year have no money to grow the game. Even test-playing nations are in strife. Remember the mighty West Indies from the top? They've been in a constant 3-decade-long decline, culminating in their failure to qualify for the 2023 Cricket World Cup. Speaking of the Cricket World Cup, in 2007, 16 teams played in it, and India were knocked out in the first round, and because they only played the 3 matches, TV companies took a hit. With India set to host the next tournament, they ensured 14 teams would play in the next World Cup, and India would get 6 matches, before then ensuring the World Cup would reduce to just 10 teams in 2019 and 2023, ensuring they would play 9 matches. This is the irony. If Indians had a true, hardcore passion watching it on TV and running the game, you would think they would watch all the top-level cricket, but 2007 proved they are mostly interested only in themselves. In further irony, when the Umpire Decision Review System, the DRS, was finally introduced, India refused to play with it. If the BCCI was really angry about the umpiring in the 2008 SCG Test match, then they would have jumped at the chance to use DRS, but it was never about anything other than flat-out greed. The scorecard may suggest India, but the true losers of the 2008 SCG Test match was those of us all around the world who want to see the positive long-term health and growth of the great sport of cricket.